Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Legendarium Podcast. This is our first episode on Joe Abercrombie's First Law trilogy. Today, The Blade Itself, Part 1, which makes up about the first 40% of the book. So, if you are reading along with us, if this is your first time reading the book, that's all we're going to cover. I can't promise that my co-microphonists here won't, accidentally say something from a couple chapters into part 2, but we're not going to spoil anything from the end of the book or whatever. So,
yeah.
Anyway, I am Craig Hanks, your host. Over there, he is Ryan. Hi, Ryan.
Hello, everyone.
And yes, he's the one that puts on weird, quasi not his own accents.
Yeah.
And Ken.
I'm not sure I can remember anything that happened in part 2 of the book, and I read it.
All right, so Ryan.
Let that be a warning to you.
Ryan and Ken and I are going to, like I said, go through part 1 of The Blade Itself, and we will have our own observations. We did get a few comments. I gave people about a half hour's notice on Discord.
Good.
We did get a few comments.
Why so much?
So that is what we will be discussing today. Characters, plot,
Characters.
And Ken will have a recap for us. But before we get to all that, I do want to remind everybody to go to thelegendarium.com, where you can find links to our various resources, such as they are. Okay, the Discord link is there. The Patreon link is there. You can also find the audio for all of our past episodes grouped by different authors, different subjects. So you can find it all there grouped in that way. You can also subscribe on iTunes or whatever it's called these days, or Spotify, and get everything in order. So that's fine. But if you're having trouble, you're like, hey, I want to see all of their coverage on, Brandon Sanderson or Tolkien or whatever. You can find all that grouped by subject on the site. All right. So how's that for housekeeping?
That is clean.
There you go. Now let's get into it. This is something that I've been feeling myself, that there's too much throat clearing on the episodes sometimes. So let's get to the freaking book, all right? The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. Ken, you've got us a recap today.
I do. I was excited about this book. People have been like, you should read this book. So I read this book, and through the first 18 chapters, you know what I can take from this book? You can never have too many knives.
Yep.
That's about
and
all.
Stairs suck.
And stairs suck. That's about all I took. So you can never have too many knives, especially when you're a vicious barbarian of the North who's in the middle of an existential crisis, lost his family and friends, been exiled from his lands. Such is the case with Logan Ninefingers, who is still very much alive, because he will let you know more than Blackpink announces that they're in your area. The world is in a state. Nobody gets that? Nobody?
No.
Nothing?
Sorry, man.
Listen to music, people.
You're old.
I know. They're young. Anyway. The world is in a state of near perpetual war. The barbarians in the north are under new management, and the new king wants to annex the lands to the south. So the spirits that talk to Ninefingers tell him to go and find the old wizard who's been hiding for years in a remote library, because of course. Then there's this detestable fop who just wants to party and duel, and he's like the worst character ever. Oh, and who wants? He also wants to nail his best friend's sister. So there's that. There's also a greasy inquisitor who used to be a war hero on the fast track to greatness before years as a POW left him disfigured and crippled. He's got a couple of bruisers with questionable morals who are more than happy to disappear people like the back-roomed card counter. Stuff happens, I'm sure. There are fights, orc-like creatures. There's this giant tattooed guy and a witch. But basically, part 1 is just a collection of bad people who do bad things, or good people who do the wrong things, or a bit of both. Stupid people doing stuff.
That's the end of your recap. Wow,
that's
okay.
all. That's it.
Finishing strong on the recap there, Ken.
Yeah, you know why I finished like that? Because that's how how part 1 ends. It's just like,
and we're done.
Here it is.
It is
18 chapters of exposition and setup. That's all it is.
It at least ends on it ends on an action beat.
It does. There are actually a couple of really good action beats in the first 18.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah. Anyway,
in the first part.
But
that's it. That's all I got.
We should. Okay, so now with that, just so people remember. Ken, I don't know how great a job you did at reminding us what actually goes on in these chapters, but it was kind of funny. So I accept. Much like
mission accomplished.
Much like the book itself. It's kind of funny. So yeah, I'll keep reading.
Close
enough for me. All right, Ryan. Okay. actually, let's start with me. I want to just kind of set up where everybody's at. Kenn, you have already said, I read this book.
Yes.
So you have finished to the end and reread part 1 for this discussion.
Yes.
Ryan, you have read the book in its entirety twice?
This is my second time through. I have read the entire First Law trilogy, and it's the sequel trilogy. I've read all 6 books.
So you're basically an Abercrombie super fan, mega fan, expert on all things.
Yes, exactly. One time through is all I need. That's
Good, perfect.
That's been my slogan for life.
And did you?
And here you are twice through now.
Yeah.
Did you get through the whole first book again, or just the first part?
I'm already into the second book on my second read through.
You just calm down, dude. Calm down.
He's a go-getter.
He's the guy sitting at the front, in the middle chair or middle desk in the front of the classroom, who's like, "Teacher, you forgot the quiz."
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly
Teacher,
right.
you haven't assigned us any homework yet.
Yes. Because I'm going to shine. I don't care what happens to you. I'm going to shine.
You and your wedgie are going to shine.
Wait, what?
Because the kids that get wedgies, they're never mind.
Oh,
bullied.
okay, all right. I thought you were.
I was not.
No.
All right.
No.
Okay. Anyway,
yes,
and just to complete the setup of where we're at, I have read part 1, and that is it. Okay, that is where I'm at. And to be clear, I do often I will either read the book or do a mix. You know, I'll do the whisper sync on Kindle and Audible, so that I can kind of flip back and forth. On this one, I did it on a long drive, so it was all audiobook for part 1. Just to set the table of where we're all at and what our experience has been. Okay, so with that in mind, Ryan, as the most experienced and expert of Abercrombie fans among us, how do you like part 1 of book 1? And maybe I should set this up with one additional part to this question. How did you feel about it the first time through, and do you feel differently now?
I do feel differently now. I felt very similar to the sentiments that seem to be presented from our discussions and from the recap here. There's nothing going on. There's nothing grabbing me. Why am I? It's whatever. On the first time through, I just pushed through to get to the end and read the story. The second time through, I am enthralled with this book. I love what he's done and what he's setting up. A lot of it is the just natural sense of I don't have to learn about who these characters are. I don't have to learn all those pieces. I can just focus on the larger story piece, because this is entirely possible. I could be wrong on this, but this is a storyline that I feel like he has the beginning and end in mind from the very beginning. This isn't a discovery writing. Like, he's got the whole thing laid out, and so he's writing it to a point, which then makes it so that he doesn't feel like he has to lock in, high action points, or I got to finish this on a high note. It's because this is just, mile marker 7 on a 40-mile trek. So like that's kind of how it goes. So for me, it's a lot more enjoyable on the second read through than it was the first time.
Well, good, because that mirrors what I'm going through right now, which is I'm bored to tears. Like I am bored. The characters are interesting. It's not that there's nothing to appreciate or to like, and we'll get to a lot of the stuff that I do like, actually. But as I was about halfway through part 1, and at some point I was listening to is it Caval, or what's the name of the kid who's studying fencing?
Giselle.
Giselle, yeah.
Giselle. Well, whatever. Whatever. I can't remember names. I don't even remember your names anymore. I wrote it down, and now I'm not looking at my paper.
The weird
anymore.
thing is, when you actually open up the book, the spellings of all the names, at least for me, I didn't get other than Logan, I didn't get a single name spelled right.
It's true. Yeah.
And so this is one, honestly, okay, sidetrack. What? The Legendarium doing a tangent? One of the reasons that I don't like to just listen to the audiobook on the first time through is for this reason. It's harder for me to retain names. It's harder for me to understand the spellings. With a careful author, this matters more, but with a careful author who takes their names and cultures and languages seriously, you can often get a sense of the cohesive nature of this culture versus that culture through the spelling of the names and the places and the words and whatnot, right? So usually I do like to read for most of it, the first time through. And this time wasn't a possibility. Anyway, I was reading through Giselle's storyline and got like, how do I put this in words? He is an aimless fop, who has like he has talent, he has skill, but he has no direction. And at some point, I was like, oh, much like part 1 of this book. I don't know if that was intentional, but I certainly felt it at some point with him.
Yeah, Giselle's main storyline drive is fencing in the contest, and
but it's not. That's the thing, is in part 1 it is not. He doesn't care.
Right.
Yes.
No, it's my father wants me to do well.
Yes.
I get all this stuff for doing well.
Well,
I get to party. That's
one of
it's his MacGuffin. It's not his motivation, but it's the MacGuffin that drive him.
Right.
This is what he's doing, but he's not doing it for him. Not yet.
That was one of the nice moments of the book. One of my highlights was the conversation that Glokta comes and has with him. And I was expecting a long, kind of drawn out conversation, and Glokta's just like, "You're a dick," and then walks away. And
if you actually try, you'll be good, but that's it.
Right.
And and he doesn't like, and that's about all he does to try to convince him. Yeah, and this is actually, I have to admit, I was a little affected by that conversation, because in the last, I don't know, in the last couple of years, maybe on a professional level, I have been kind of aimless, and I haven't had a goal in mind. But I know I have talents here and there. Okay, maybe not here, but maybe there. I know I have talents. I know I could do things. And when he said something to the effect of a few months hard work, and you could essentially set yourself up.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's quite that way for me, but with a few months hard work, I could fill in the blank.
Yeah.
Get a job, get a job. I could get a job, but like start a business, build a brand, do this, that, the other. Like, I have capabilities, but I kind of, sometimes it's easy to just float. And so that hit me a little bit.
Giselle's life is good, and
so why would I want to change that?
There's not necessarily an impetus to change because I want better or anything, or I want to better myself, because I'm perfectly content with what I have, and that's very much Giselle's mindset at the beginning. Is that one of the key elements of the social structure of this is a hierarchy of status. That there's no meritocracy, with the exception of Colum West, who is not the black sheep. He's the odd one out in this sense, where he has actually earned his way into being more respected, even though he comes from the peasant class.
Right.
But
through his skill.
Yeah, he's the commoner mmaybe good.
Yeah, so, but in this case, it's all
he outshone the others, and now here he is.
Yeah. He's the first through the breach at Oriok and that sort of thing, and he compared to Giselle. And I think they're very well paired, specifically to kind of highlight this. Giselle is born into essentially the aristocracy, the nobility, and he is, he's the better because of this. Whereas Colum West is the character who earned his position through war and through being through the work he's done, and he won the contest that Giselle is entering before.
Right.
So we've got these two characters you kind of you put them side by side and look at their different starting points and their similar pathways, and you kind of get the chance to balance out one character versus the other and where they end up and where they're going and their personalities and why they're different. I really like that pairing there. And then you throw his sister in the middle of it to make it fun and awkward and interesting, where you have Adi, who's this woman who this female woman, this woman who just does not comport to any of the social expectations and cues. She's from the peasant class. She's a little bit of a lush, and a little bit, and because she's so different, we get this love starting to, or whatever you want to call
attraction
it, attraction to Giselle.
Yes.
And Adi, and you're like, okay, well, this isn't gonna work because of their status. Like, this triangle alone, I think, has the potential to be a good story, And that's just one set of relationships in a series where you have about, seven point of view characters by the time we were out of this book.
6 or 7, something like that.
Well, and even just in part one, there's
just in the section.
Amount.
Yeah.
So actually, let's. I do also want to throw into that mix. So you said we have the pairing of Giselle, and the other guy,
Colin West.
Right. But then you can also throw Glokta into that mix because Glokta won it like a decade earlier.
Yes.
And then went to war, got captured, got mutilated.
He was on the fast track to be what Giselle is trying to be.
And so there you have this illustration of work hard and you could have everything. There's the guy who worked hard and got everything, and then there's the guy who worked hard, got everything, and then had it all ripped away, painfully and brutally, right?
And then there's the guy who doesn't work hard and gets everything anyway, which is so you got the 3. Yeah, you got it.
Giselle on that one.
Anyway. Giselle's the guy who could work hard,
right?
And
he's the one that's handed it. And West, I thought you were talking about West was the guy
in this society. So Giselle, I think it's important for me to remember that yes, he's a noble, so he doesn't have to work to come up from the peasant class, but he's also a third son or something. Like he's as I understand it, he's not in line to inherit anything.
But his dad likes him best, and it pisses off his brothers. That's right. They do mention like that. They do mention that.
So anyway, that in this type of society, I think it's always important to remember what order you were born in.
Yeah,
that's going to matter. Anyway, okay. So what else was? Oh shoot, I was going to say something.
This is if you think of it, you can.
Yeah, go for it.
Just on a side note, Stephen Pacey is the narrator for the audiobook, and the audiobook, in my opinion, is a masterclass. It's incredible. His
characters are great.
Sandan Glokta's character, when he reads, I hated Glokta on my first read through because he's a greasy slime ball. He's like, oh, you're a bad person who had everything. Yeah. But now as I listen through, I love the Glokta chapters and listening to the thought processes that Joe Abercrombie writes out for him, because he always gives the subtextual thought that Glokta actually is thinking, and then the line that he actually says.
Right.
And that's a lot of the comedy in the book, the humor that's found in those observations between characters' thoughts and their actual words. But
the conversation, when the guy asks him to go talk to Giselle, and his internal monologue is like, yeah, you wouldn't ask me for this, 5 years, you didn't even acknowledge I exist, and now you need me, you
right.
Yeah. I think Glokta's internal monologues are some of the best. Logan has some good ones, but they're also... Joe Abercrombie does a great job writing the personalities of these characters in those inner monologues and creating distinct characterization in those inner monologue discussions.
Yeah.
That's I think one of the strong points of the book, of this series and this book is when you are in a point of view character, you get to, and you're inside their mind, it is a very distinct voice.
It should be.
For those.
Yeah. It is not always. It should be.
Yeah, and that's
saying in the hands of a capable author, it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's something that Joe Abercrombie does a cut above, though, I think.
Well, and I will say, because to your point, Ryan, the audiobook is very, very well performed. Mm-hmm. It's something that a good narrator can help with quite a bit.
True. That is
absolutely.
Because, it's much like watching a visual representation. It gives you something outside of your own imagination to latch onto. Another reason why, great as the audiobook may be, and it is so far, I don't often like to start with the audiobook because I want to form my own images and whatnot.
Yeah.
But again, wasn't possible this time. I will say I did read the first 2 chapters or 3 chapters like a year or 2 ago when we first promised and to read this series, and then promptly broke that promise. But I did read the first couple chapters.
Hey, we're here now.
And I do remember reading that first Glokta chapter with the first torture scene, and it was messed up.
Oh, and he's got...
That's a good way to put it.
He's got some more messed up. But this was my first book that is... And I feel like it's a book that a lot of people use as the definition of a grimdark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like this is... When you think of grimdark, you think of Joe Abercrombie. And I don't know. I haven't read enough grimdark to be that way. This was my first real book series that fit that way. And I think part of my initial response to the book series was the fact that I don't really care for grimdark. I think, that bad things happening to good people and stuff like that. Yeah, that's part of every book, but I guess there is no good guys. There is no good guys. It's just there's the morally gray of everything is morally gray, and everybody. And then I was like, I don't like this. I want a good guy. I want a bad guy.
Yeah.
But man, I have different feelings. I have different feelings coming around. I'm definitely coming around on this. There are still some gore moments that I'm like, ooh, I'm a little concerned that you came up with that, Joe, in your own mind.
There's always that concern. Should we do some listener questions? We'll see how far we can get through listener questions, and then if we have any time left over, we'll get to our other observations. But the thing about listener questions is it often brings our own stuff out anyway, the stuff we would have bullet pointed or did bullet point. All right, so again, I asked this about an hour ago, so we'll see what people came up with. So Toromir says, seen any tropes lately? Been engaged in subversive activities? Okay. Chesky asks, I have to ask, do you like the crew so far? And who do you think is the best character? Now, the crew, I assume, is Logan's crew that, like in the prologue in the first chapter, he's separated from. Is that who we're talking
three
about?
Trees,
right?
The Dogman,
Dogman, and
Black Dow.
Oh yeah, Black Dow,
and the Weakest. And there's 5 of them.
Yeah,
right.
I like that.
Anyway,
the
but
Weakest.
I do want to point out that at this point, at the end of part 1, we have had precisely one scene with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was a good scene.
I'm not saying that. Yeah, that's so. It's at this point, I would say an invalid question because we've only had one scene with them, and it's through Dogman's POV. And so, like, I haven't had enough time to formulate a favorite. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Not that it's not a bad question. Eventually, it's just it's not gonna help us right now.
Yeah, there is if they're just they might be talking about another crew setup here, but we haven't.
Well, he could just be talking about the crew as in the characters we have so far. And if that's the case, the characters we have so far, I think from a character perspective, we might be all in agreement here that I really like Glokta as a character so far. Just given my very nature, I mean, I would be set up to instinctively like Logan. And he's fine. But he hasn't, I don't know, he hasn't really done much yet other than talk about how he's still alive and talk to some spirits. I mean,
I do. So
although he does have some introspection that's really good. Sorry,
you've made fun of the line a couple of times. I'm still alive.
Yeah.
Right. I like it. I
like the line. I like
that he has like it. It's an incredibly simple mantra.
Yeah.
But it's kind of this way to remind himself that I made it out.
Yeah.
If I ever can't say that to myself, I know I'm dead.
Yeah. No, I like the line. I think it's neat. It's funny to me. He just keeps saying, I'm still alive.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, actually, Yeti Beats asked us to talk about Glokta, the idea of a torturer as a main POV character. He's a catalyst for Abercrombie's humor. Do we find him sympathetic? I feel like we've kind of gone through that a little bit. And
yeah.
We'll probably talk about Glokta again.
We'll definitely talk about Glokta again.
So let's go to...
We should table that. Yeah, we should definitely table that one.
Nano Tyran, who asks, did you think this book had a plot? Actually, okay. This is great. I think this is a good springboard to talk about something that I think we are getting much better at as a podcast group.
Oh.
And that is expectations. Right? So the most famous Legendarium example of this has to be Robin Hobb. Right? Yeah. We go into Assassin's Apprentice and just hate the crap out of that book. Yeah, everybody hated it. Oh man, this is terrible. Kyle,
poor thing, broke Kyle.
Yeah, exactly. Broke Kyle. He still isn't over it. He still hates that book. I have gotten over it. But the lesson that we took from hating Assassin's Apprentice was we went into it expecting what we didn't get.
Right.
A book about assassins, a book about assassinations, something happening, like, and because our expectations weren't met, we thought it was not good. And of course it is good. It's just good in its own way, right?
Yeah.
And so if I read this book at the same time that we read Assassin's Apprentice, I would probably hate this book because I go in expecting, I see this blood spattered cover and hear grimdark and violence and, just insanity. And my one of my main POVs is a torturer. And so I go into it expecting these things, and it's 17 chapters of conversations, basically, right? Okay, that's an exaggeration, but you know what I mean. I would have hated it. But at this point, between that and there have been some others along the way. Recently, we did the Author's Shelf with Mary Robinette Kowal about the Dispossessed, and how, going into that book, I essentially wiped out any expectations because I don't know anything about the book, so I'm not going to pretend in my mind like I know anything about it. And so, we get this practice along the way. And so now, Nano Tyrant says, did you think this book had a plot? I didn't assume. I've learned not to assume. But it does bring up I think it brings up an interesting idea of, should you, and everybody's going to be different, right? This is a subjective thing, but should you go into a book knowing something about it? If you go to a movie, should you watch the trailer first? Or should you just go in completely fresh, right? So with a book, should you have something to set your expectations, of what you're going to come across in that book? Yeah. It's an interesting question. And again, it's subjective. I think everybody's going to have to answer it for yourself. But Ryan, what do you think?
Well, I think that there is I think it's more realization of what are you going to go in with, not should you go in with that, because I don't think that you are very likely to enter in with absolutely no expectations whatsoever, just naturally.
Right.
Someone's going to have recommended this book to you. You're going to have loved the art on the cover. Something will have caught your attention and established some piece for you. The most important thing for you as the reader is to identify what that is. What is it? I'm doing this off the recommendation of this person that I trust, or off of the art or the cover here. And so that is all I'm going to carry in this, and I got to take the weight of everything else off of it.
Right.
And that's a secret to enjoyment of something, and experiencing something new, and allowing you to, because you don't have to hold it against judge it against what it is not, just judge it against what it is. And that's,
I just, side note, you ready for this? An utter tangent. I just read a little excerpt from somebody's review of the U.S. World War II Museum, and they talked about, oh man, if you go in here, you're expecting, or if you went to this museum, you would come out with only one perspective on the war, and like, where's a,
oh my goodness,
like it's like these people think the war started in 1941. It's like, what were your expectations going into this, into the U.S. World War II Museum? Anyway,
I really wanted an even-handed opportunity to understand.
But the point I was getting at that you reminded me of is this idea of sometimes our reviews, whether we're doing an official review on a podcast or you do your little review in your head, we review it as the book we wish it were, rather than the book it is, right? So. Anyway, sorry, go on. I interrupted you. I'm sure your train of thought has long since left the station, but
no, just on that point, your point of should you have expectations? I think it's, like I said, it's more about knowing what your expectations are and balancing that out versus trying to decide, like, find or remove all expectation. I don't think that's a reasonable ask, quite frankly. It's just knowing yourself well enough to know what that is, what those expectations are, and that will free you up to be able to make judgments instead of I know people have different feelings on this, but I get really frustrated with how objective everyone tries to be with reviewing a heavily subjective art form.
Sure. In
books and movies and everything else. It's an objectively, it's an objectively bad film. You can like it, but you have to just admit that it's objectively bad. No, I don't.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
No, I think you're right there.
I can admit whether I hate it or not, or whether I love it. You may not. That's fine. Whatever.
Just balance out the idea of I don't like versus it's bad, and that comes from understanding yourself and your own expectations going in.
Right. Yeah.
For me, it's just the ability to let the book wear you down, kind of like a relationship. Let the person wear you down. Because
Ken, I feel like we need to talk about how you view relationships.
This is how I got married.
All right, hang on. Ken, lie down on the couch. All right, so
wait, Why is Ryan lying down? No.
Tell me more about how you view relationships. Does the word shackle come to mind for you?
Only... Never mind.
Don't do it.
Never mind.
Hard left, Ken. Steer left. Steer far. Get away.
How do I get out of this?
Don't say hard, Ryan. Come on.
Anyway.
Where were we?
I don't know.
Okay, so anyway, it's... For me, we've talked about this before, what we were talking about right before, that I need about 100 pages to really figure out what the crap is going on when I'm into a new book. So
Depending on the book.
Yeah.
But we, as epic fantasy readers, this is common for us, right?
Exactly, because a lot of them do have a lot of setup before you really get the feel of what is going on. And so with this one too, I tried to pick it up back when people said we should read it. I tried to pick it up and I read the first chapter and I was like, oh, I got other stuff I got to get to. I'll get back to this later. And so now that I have to read it, I'm like, okay, I'll slog through this. And by the time we get to part 2, I'm like, all right, now I see who is who, and I understand who's connected to who, and I understand where we're at. So by the time I got back to reading part 1 again, now I'm invested. The first time around, I'm like, I don't understand what's going on. I didn't even understand what flatheads were at first. I'm like,
I still don't know what that.
The Shenka and the flatheads.
Yeah, the Shenka and the flatheads. And I'm like, what? And then by the time I come around a second time, I realize, oh, the Shenka are those orc-like things, and they are sometimes called flatheads derogatorily. And now I understand.
They're the equivalents of, in most fantasy, they'd be goblins.
Right.
That sort of thing.
Okay.
So, but that's for me anyway, is what I need. I need to push through that, and it is a matter of getting rid of expectation and just sinking into the setting.
That's actually something that as I've helped other people into Cosmere related things, and they start reading Way of Kings or whatever, I know from multiple read-throughs of that, like the first 9 chapters or so of that book, you are introduced to like 9 different points of view, and some of them you never come back to. And so actually one of the things I will do for people when we start that is say, here are your anchor points. Here are the characters you need to latch on to so you have a place to go. And I actually think that would be helpful for a lot of people coming into First Law, saying like, okay, yes, you're going to get a chapter about Dogman and all these other these other guys here. That's good. Keep it in the back of your mind. Don't hold on to them. You don't need to worry about them too much quite yet.
Right.
Logan, Giselle, Glocta.
Logan, Giselle, and Glocta are your 3 to grab onto and focus on. You have a character that's going to feel like a point of view character, or that's going to feel like a main character, but they're never a point of view character in the book, at least as far as I recall on this one here. And that's Baez.
Yeah.
The first of the Magi. He's
right.
Yeah,
he's an important character.
He's a central figure, but he's not. Yeah, he's never a POV character. I don't think. Yeah.
So you'll want to track. You'll want to be aware of Baez. You'll want to be aware of Logan. But Logan's your point of view for him usually, pretty much the whole time. Logan, Glocta, Giselle will be your anchor points. Grab onto them and hold onto those for your first read through, and then as you go through, you'll figure out all the other little pieces. Like, oh yeah, the Archlector Sulk. What do I care about him? Do I care about the Prince? Whatever his bucket is, and obviously I don't.
Yeah,
but
it's a specific and interesting way to structure a story that I think is becoming more. It's becoming more widespread, but it's running up against audiences who have never had to deal with it, and I'm thinking specifically of TV. Mm-hmm. In the age of prestige TV series, and now, so we're recording this in late 2022. We have The Rings of Power and House of the Dragon, but you can go back and you can talk about Game of Thrones for example, whatever. I think of video games sometimes. Those are a little different because you are the POV character, right? But this idea that, look, the first 100 pages, the first 20, 25, 40, 50% of this book is going to be setting you up for the roller coaster to come. Mm-hmm. We're just cranking to the top of the ride for a long, long, long time. And you'll be rewarded, but it takes a long time to get up there. That is epic fantasy. That is exactly. A key ingredient to epic fantasy is that cranking to the top of the roller coaster. And it's not something that has been otherwise widespread. And so anyway, so other people are now getting a taste of that with their favorite TV shows and with some video games and whatnot. And interesting how their reactions have been to something we go through as readers a lot.
Yeah, I think that's something that as epic fantasy readers we are accustomed to. The other thing is it is something that it's tough at first, but time makes it so much better for you as a reader, because once you finish things and you go back to the reread on a reread, or I would just think about any of those fantasy series or anything like that you felt like it's a slow burn, something like that. When it's all finished and you go back and watch the whole thing, you're like, wow, that was fantastic because of everything that was there. Some people really enjoy maybe being the slow burn. I do not. That's not really me, which is surprising considering how much I love epic fantasy. But the payoff at the end and seeing all the setup and everything is very, very enjoyable after the fact. This is one of those waiting till the whole season's out type things. That's, with epic fantasy, maybe you don't want to start a book series like this if it's not finished, if you're one of those people who hates slow burn starts.
I've heard a lot of people say that they don't like to do that. Megan is one of them. She's like, I don't want to read any more Dresden because it's not done. Like, I get that. But,
Well, I think we've answered Nano Tyron's question.
And then
I hope 4 or 5 questions around the one.
Exactly. All right. So now Kip-Tan says, how has this book changed your opinion on stairs? So actually, I love this. I love this question because it does get to something that Abercrombie does really well, and that a lot of good authors do really well. And that is to make you reconsider something that you take for granted. Okay. And so in this case, it's stairs. We talked about it with the 5th season, where I thought it was fascinating in the 5th season and don't worry, I'm not spoiling anything. It was fascinating to have my main character be I am inside the head in first person, inside the head of a middle-aged black woman. It's different for me, and it provides opportunities to stretch my mind and right. And so this is it's funny. It's a funny scene, or it's funny writing in a way, but I actually found it more affecting than funny, because it's like, oh yeah, you know what? I've fallen downstairs. Freaking sucks. I just about broke my left pinky toe off falling down the stairs. So you have these experiences maybe, and that kind of cast my mind back to that. Falling down the stairs, terrible idea.
It was something that it starts out as funny until you realize that, it's
somebody's reality.
Yeah, it's a reality, and you're like, oh, and now it's something sympathetic. As a guy who is rapidly advancing in age,
I'll say,
and no kidding, and who has beaten his body to pieces in the gym over the last decade plus, and who
trying desperately to reverse the
hold on,
time.
Exactly, hold on to the faded youth, exactly, and doing all the Spartans and all that. I found a lot more sympathy for his aversion to stairs than I might have when I was 35 or 40 or whatever. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to go downstairs again. And it's just a matter of simply waking up in the morning going, stairs.
I love that, like you said, it's kind of funny, but the writing in there it's really good. The quoting where he talks about my worst enemy, the stairs. If I could have,
and going down is worse than going up because you can fall a lot farther and stuff.
He talks about if I could shake the one man in history's hands, it's the man who invented the chair.
The chair.
If I could, if I could torture one man or whatever, it's the man who invented stairs. Like that. Just the writing on it is, because it's not just, oh, I hurt when I walk upstairs. He does a really great job of showing rather than telling of Glocta's hatred of stairs by explaining it through this really side wall's not the right word. My brain's shutting down.
An inner perspective.
Hang in there. It's only 11:30 in the morning.
Yeah, but he does it just through this little alternate writing
little
style
inner monologue thing, and
I love it. I think it's fantastic, and I'm much more appreciative of it this time than I was on first read.
All right, so let's move on to another one. Let's see. Okay, so sometimes I just ask for favorite lines. I think we got one here from Yeti Beats in the chapter Tea and Vengeance. When I think this is the final chapter of part 1 when he slays Black Toe. Black Toe. Is that who he's talking about? Logan says, "That was a good man, better than me." And Baez responds, "History is littered with dead good men."
Yes, that is that's a great line. Well, the line right before when he kills him too, and Black Toe says, "I'm glad it's you," and Logan says, "I'm not," and then does it anyway. I like that line a lot.
Yeti Beats goes on and says, Abercrombie is both criticized and applauded for the cynicism in his books. How do you feel about it? Even if you feel it's, or even if you even feel it's there in his book at all. I can read. I know words. So how do we feel about the cynicism if we feel like it's there at all? So far, I'm not like overwhelmed by some sense of cynicism. So far. It's not this. I don't think this cynicism is the overall tone of the book. I think you have characters who survive through cynicism. Glokta survives a bit through his cynicism, and all the characters at some level are in a survival mode at varying degrees, and that is actually a very interesting thing to look at, and which I think we should revisit later on. Their degrees of trust and versus cynicism and things like that through the whole piece. I don't think I 100% see why people might feel that it's a cynical book, but I don't think that's the overarching tone or theme. Right.
On my first read through, I likened it to Game of Thrones, but with optimism. But more upbeat, I guess is the way I put it. In Song of Ice and Fire, everything seems dark and cynical and down. And there's and it just keeps going. But this, it feels like everybody's kind of cynical, but everybody's kind of upbeat about it at the same time.
Well, if you look at...
You know what I mean?
Life sucks, but I'm not mad about it.
Life sucks, but it's life. I'm cool. I mean, we're just going to keep going. Whereas, like I said, the other one, it just feels like everybody is just down all the time.
Well, I think you have to look at it through each individual character's take and view on the world, because there really aren't a lot of events specifically to...
Events, dear boy, events.
But you look at, like, for example, Logan. Logan, based on everything we know about him so far that's been said about Logan Nine Fingers and how he was just this feared, ferocious killer in the North, and that he defeated all of these named men, and, but his whole thing, like even the line we've talked about, I'm still alive, he's got that little sense of, I'm trying to be better than I was.
Yeah.
He just seems tired.
Oh, absolutely worn out, exhausted. But he's trying to better himself. You get this sense of, I'm supposed to like Logan because Logan's my good guy. Logan is the guy who he did terrible things in the past, but is being better now.
But now he's trying to make up for him.
Well, that's why we the Baez chapters are pretty good, because I I should say I don't know yet how I will feel about Baez, but through Logan's eyes, here's somebody who is wise and quippy and down to earth and relatable in his wisdom, right?
Yeah.
And he seems to see Baez as somebody who can kind of lift him out of his life path, right?
Yeah.
And set him on a different one. Now, again, I don't know how I'm going to feel about him, because as we alluded to earlier, Baez feels like a big major main character, but we see him through Logan's eyes. And that often makes a character untrustworthy to me, because I don't know what's going on behind his quips and his wisdom and whatnot, and what his ultimate goals are. So we'll see. And I'm sure there's a bunch of people either, cheering or rolling their eyes at me saying that about him, but
someone's throwing out a wait till book 3.
Yeah, exactly.
That's something. I wish I'd marked it, but he has that whole monologue with, what's the apprentice's name?
The guy he has to carry for 40 miles.
Yeah, he has to carry for...
Solomon Quai?
Quai.
Yeah, Quai, that's it. And has that whole line about all these things that he's done and all these things that he said and all of these things that he didn't feel bad about, but now he does, and everything. And I think I almost feel like he's supposed to be... I'm not a very deep thinker on stuff anyway.
Now you stop that, Ken. You stop right there.
I'm man enough to admit when I am what I am, but this I feel like is supposed to be the moment that everybody does the same thing as they're reading the book, going, well, yeah, I've done things but I'm always trying to be better, and
yeah,
it's a chance for you to
basically
relate.
taking your reflection of yourself and how can you improve and all that. And I don't know if that's supposed to be what the reader is thinking, but I certainly went, oh yeah. Well,
it's getting to the stairs comment I was making earlier that that the purpose of any book like this, or at least it can be a purpose. Okay, maybe not with some, but one of your purposes can be to try to empathize, to be more sympathetic with people around you in real life, not just in books, but take it into your real life and say, like, you know what, stairs are easy for me. Bring on the stairs. But that's not going to be the case for everybody. And you never know, like somebody who is walking up the stairs might be doing so in great pain.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's little things like that, but it can be for bigger ones as well. Anyway, sorry.
True.
Did I derail you, Ken?
Nope, that was about it.
Okay. All right.
I think that there's a theme here that's not part of the book. It's part of what authors do to readers that I think is interesting. Identifying when an author is maneuvering his audience.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is actually, in this case, Joe Abercrombie wants you to feel and think a specific way about a character. And he's maneuvering you through these situations and writing these specifically in a perspective in a certain way so that you feel a specific way about a character. Not all authors do that. And not with every character and things like that, but I think that there is absolutely I need my audience to feel this way about these characters because otherwise they're not going to connect with them at all. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a theme that this series, being grimdark, deserves to have fleshed out a little bit, that we should look at and be like, are we being manipulated by the author to feel a specific way about this character?
And are you okay with that? Do you have a preference over that idea of, okay, the author is maneuvering me and maneuvering these characters versus maybe a more organic feeling thing? Now, obviously, it's all maneuvered, right? They're all written. Yeah. And, it's all fictional, whatever. But some books come across the way you're talking about, and some books come across as, no, they created these characters and they created a situation, and kind of this is what happened. That more organic feel. Yeah,
and you get to kind of connect with it however you want there.
Right.
I think that be consistent with it. Mm-hmm. If you're going to do it, then it needs to be a consistent thing and purposefully driven. If you just really like a character and so you want to make sure that the audience also likes the character, that's not a good reason, not a good setup to do that. But I don't have a problem with an author trying to drive an audience into a specific feeling and thought process, as long as that is, like I said, consistent across the board. I think you will do yourself a disservice if it gets too heavy or too much, because that's when it gets into the idea of, we're talking about characters, but if you want to make a statement with a book, we've talked about this before, like if you're making a political statement or a social statement or whatever it is with a book, make your statement, but make sure it's clear and definitive that that's what it is.
Right.
Yeah, I guess I'm just saying commit. If you're going to do it, commit and make sure that that's the case. So the audience is very clear.
Yeah.
They know.
Yeah.
I'm telling you I want you to feel this way, versus feeling like, oh, you manipulated me into liking this character, and then in the end, whatever. Mostly, I don't mind being steered one direction or another. Just don't let me know you're doing it, or at least don't overly let me know you're doing it. Like
have a little subtlety.
Yeah, basically.
That's fair enough.
You can direct me. That's fine, but don't bludgeon me over the head with, you will like this character.
Yeah. All right. Fair enough. Cool. There are some calls for us to compare Abercrombie and Hobb. We've done that a little bit. But for instance, Cody says Abercrombie and Hobb are renowned for their character building and prose, often lumped together as paragons in these aspects of writing. Do you agree? And Stormrunner 1730 says Gene Wolfe has entered the chat. Now, I haven't read any Gene Wolfe, at least not more than a few pages. So I can't speak to that. It's one, and for those of you now yelling at your headphones, calm down. We'll get to Gene Wolfe. If we don't, then I don't think Drew McCaffrey on Inking It Out Loud will be my friend anymore. So we'll get there. Anyway, yeah. Comparisons to Robin Hobb.
I only read the first Robin Hobb book and I hated it. So, well, I couldn't keep up with you guys after that. I'm like, oh,
I think in order to have a fair comparison, I would need to get back in and reread.
I
Robin
would have
Hobb
to as well.
That's my thing too.
That being said, the focus, it being more about the discussions in the mind, the character building, things like that. I do see the parallels there. I think it's good. I know they're friends. If I compared another author's work to his, I would lean to Brent Weeks.
Brent Weeks, yeah. They have a fun internet rivalry going on, a fake internet rivalry. I know words. Yeah. English is easy for me. It's fine.
This is why we usually record at 11 o'clock during the day.
It's weird how much more comfortable we are at 11 o'clock at night,
right?
Than we are at 11 o'clock in the morning.
Legendarium After Dark.
I'm with you, Ryan. I would need to read Robin Hobb again. I read that first trilogy one time, and that was it. And that was a few years ago, so it's not like I have, lines from the books sticking out of my head. Like I don't remember all that stuff that clearly. So.
I should amend, just in case she's listening, I did not hate it.
Ken, calm down. You know what? I'm going to go out on a limb, Ken, and I'm going to guess that you saying I didn't like Robin Hobb's first book is not going to break her spirit.
That's the thing. I don't want her to feel like I'm just. I don't want to disrespect somebody's good work. Okay, but
it did not. That broke the camel's back. She'll never write
engage
again.
me. She'll never talk to me again.
We're going to pull all her books from production.
Wait, that's right, Ken. We're trying to get her on for Author Shelf, and you're ruining it.
This is why I'm apologizing right now, Robin. Please come on. I'll give it a second chance, though.
No, I fully intend to go back and read the Farseer trilogy again, and maybe after having read this trilogy, it will be, some of these comparisons will make more sense to me. It makes sense now. Yeah. Yes, it's character focused rather than event focused. It is introspective rather than extrospective. Yeah,
I'm trying to think of this. I guess so.
Sure. And the prose, you don't have a scene like Glocta on the stairs from somebody who is not good at prose style.
Yeah.
There you go. Yes. So when Cody says character building in prose, paragons in these aspects of writing, sure. So far, so good. I'm with you there. All right, guys. Let's wrap it up. I would ask you for predictions, but screw you guys. You're way ahead of me on these books. So my prediction, that's the thing. I don't have any predictions because so far there isn't really any plot to predict. It's just characters kind of roaming around, thinking about stuff.
There's loose things out down the road that there are Chekhov's guns that are sitting
right. War in the North and a duel with the big tattooed guy, and stuff's gonna happen.
Oh yeah. What about Fenris the Feared?
Yeah,
Fenris the Feared. That's right.
He goes through and stabs the
dagger through his own hand.
Who will face me? And Giselle being just
not today, maybe tomorrow.
Yeah, maybe tomorrow.
Okay, tomorrow then. What? Wait.
Yeah.
So I know that there's stuff coming up, but I don't have any predictions. Sorry.
Can I ask just for quick feelings and thoughts? There is obviously magic in this, but it is not a defined part of
right. It's story. Not a driver of the story.
Yeah. What are your feelings and thoughts on the magic as it exists and as we understand it so far?
I love it. I love that it is not a driver of the story. And I don't know what books 2 or 3 will hold. Maybe it will become a bigger deal, and clearly Baez can use magic. All of a sudden guys are incinerated, that sort of thing. But I like that it's not, we have to, show magic right at this moment and stuff. It's just kind of there. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I think I'm largely with Ken on that. I think have we seen magic more than once? There was the scene when he lit the trees on fire. Maybe there was something else when the witch came to town the first time.
Well, yeah, she had her magic voice, but...
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I'm largely with Ken. I like it when magic drives the story, but I also like it when it's just kind of decoration. Yeah. But I will say I did enjoy the idea. So on the road, when Logan is talking to Baez and, he's quizzing his Baez is quizzing his apprentice.
Oh yeah.
And trying to feed him answers. And he gets caught cheating. But they get into this discussion of knowledge as power. Yeah. And I like that as an aspect of this magic system, presumably going forward, the idea that, anything can be magic, anything can be powerful, but to tap into that power, you have to know that thing. You have to understand that thing.
The study of a blade of grass would take a lifetime.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so, his specialty is fire. And so he can do magic, and Logan's like, "Can't you heal him?" And he's like, "Sorry, man.
Told you we specialize."
Yeah, and healing has never been my thing.
If I can burn it closed, maybe.
But it's right. So I do. We'll see where he goes with this, but the way it had my mind turning as I was listening to that conversation was, kind of like Glocta's conversation with Giselle saying, a few months and you can have everything. You just have to apply yourself and focus and, want it. The magic system feels like it may be a similar type of thing where it's like, look, everything has potential, has power. Any subject that you can dive into has something to it. And I like that concept, like in real life, sans magic. I like that idea that there's an old story that I remember hearing when I was a kid of a woman who was kind of aimless in her life, and she wanted something. She wanted some purpose, and she wanted some focus, and so she was kind of dejectedly sitting on the ground, and the wise man comes by and says, "What are you looking at?" This is apparently a true story, by the way. It says, "What are you looking at?" And she's just looking down at the ground and bricks, and he says, "What's a brick?" And she goes, "I don't know, cement and rock and what." Yeah, but what is a brick? And then she actually devoted the next few years of her life to knowing what a brick is and studied it and became the world's foremost expert on bricks and published books about it and all this stuff. And then, she had achieved this renown as apparently this is a real thing. And you do need people who know about bricks and building and materials and all that stuff. So this is a legit thing. And it gave her purpose and focus. And then eventually she had another conversation with that same guy. And so they're walking along and talking about bricks underneath their feet. And he says, "What's that?" And they look down, and it was an ant crawling across the bricks. And so he says, "What's an ant?" And, and then a few years later, she was one of the world's foremost experts on ants, that idea that it doesn't matter what the subject is, but focus and perseverance and, the right amount of luck and intelligence and wit can give anything power in your life. I like that concept quite a bit. So we'll see if the magic system leans into any of that kind of thing, but maybe.
Okay. We'll see.
All right. Well, I think that'll do it for today. Let's call it there. This is part 1. I expected us to only go for 40 minutes so that I could make a joke about, because it's 40% of the book. Yeah. So we'll have a much longer episode after part 2, but we'll see. So we'll do part 2 in a couple weeks here, and I am looking forward to it, especially after this discussion. I'm a little bored with part 1, because I do want things to happen, but I recognize what we've been talking about. It's all getting set up, so we'll see how it goes.
I actually wrote down as part 2 was starting, a few pages into part 2, I actually wrote down, now we're getting somewhere. So there you go.
Anyway, so I am looking forward to it now, and we'll get there. And for everybody else, enjoy those coming discussions. And please, if you do enjoy this, if this is interesting or fun for you, we appreciate you listening. That is the number one thing we ask of you. And then number 2 would be, hey, come hang out on Discord and let's chat about it. There's an amazingly fun and friendly Discord for you to chat about it. You can find the link at thelegendarium.com, and you too can join in the conversation on the nicest corner of the internet. But the third thing I would say is, if you do enjoy these conversations, please share them. A podcast that isn't growing is dying, and we do want to grow. We want to reach new audiences, and it is uncouth and awkward for me to go to like an Abercrombie subreddit and be like, hey, we're doing a podcast. Hey, everybody come listen.
Over here, come listen.
It's very advertising. I count on you guys to help us out in that regard. If you enjoy that, go to your Facebook groups, go to your Reddit groups, whatever. And I really appreciate the shout outs that we get in those places.
We'd really like to get into the French prison system and the Spanish prison system.
We've worn out the Swedish.
The Swedish are getting a little, they know us too well now.
That's right. It's no longer torture in Sweden.
Yeah.
It's
now it's just background noise.
Would we be a tool in Glocta's belt?
You would be.
I've got a pair of headphones here for you. I'm going to listen to these three men talk and blither on for hours.
On that note, thanks everybody, and we'll see you next time.